Hey everyone, Seth Campbell here with the new Segue Says podcast. This episode is going to feature two classic songs that make prominent use of the old Fender Rhodes electric piano. And as such, I have a Rhodes-like sound set to my keyboard here. For those who don't know, Rhodes and Wurlitzer were two of the first real electric pianos to hit the market, and you hear them in a lot of music through the 60s and 70s. And you can still hear them today, although it's usually synthesizer imitations. I believe both of them make their sounds acoustically, but have built-in amplifiers because it's so quiet, so that you can actually hear the tines of the keyboard. The Rhodes, you can spot it, it's a classic EP sound that has that little sort of bell overtone, whereas a Wurlitzer is something more like this, it doesn't really have that. Has sort of a harder edge to it. It doesn't really have the bell. But anyway, both of these classic songs use the Fender Rhodes. The songs are Dancin' in the Moonlight by King Harvest and the theme from Taxi, also known as Angela, by Bob James. Now, you may not necessarily recognize these songs by title, but I guarantee you've heard them because they're both just classics that pop up everywhere. Now, both of them are in the key of E flat, or C minor, which is the relative minor of E flat. Both songs kind of sit between the two, and they're at very similar tempos. So it's pretty natural that these two fit together. In fact, I'm sure someone before me has come up with this. I'm amazed it took me as long as it did to put these two together. Dancin' in the Moonlight by King Harvest. I guess it's probably fair to call King Harvest a one-hit wonder. I mean, this is the one song by them that everyone knows, but it is so iconic and has such great staying power. Like, I know people my age, Berkeley kids, who will still cover this song at parties and house shows, and it'll be a big hit. It really is just a feel-good party song about, dancing in the moonlight, just having a good time and forgetting everything else for the moment. We get hit almost every night when that old moon gets big and bright. It's supernatural delight. Everybody's dancing in the moonlight. Everybody here is out of sight. They don't bark and they don't bite. They keep things loose, they keep things light. Everybody's dancing in the moonlight. Dancing in the moonlight. Everybody feels so warm and bright. It's such a fine and natural sight. Everybody's dancing in the moonlight. And the whole song really is just this loop. There are a couple other jazzy chords thrown into the intro, but it really is just F minor, B flat, E flat, B flat over D, C minor 7. And the right hand part I'm playing is something pretty close to the Rhodes part in the original song. So like I said, you probably know this song even if you wouldn't necessarily know that King Harvest was the name of the artist. And it's been recorded, by lots of different artists and used in movies and commercials and stuff. Now that I've mentioned it, if you haven't heard it in a while, you're going to start hearing it everywhere. Because that's the way these things work. Now, the theme from Taxi. This is actually, to date, the only how-to video I have ever posted on my channel, because I actually did just a tutorial for my brother on how to play it, and I decided to post it a couple of years ago, and looking back on it, oof, I shudder. It's not that good. But it is still, super fun to play. It's a little difficult to play because it is an instrumental, so the keyboard part is really important. Now, the old TV show Taxi is where a lot of people got their start, including writers that would go on to make Cheers and Frasier, actors like Danny DeVito and Judd Hirsch and Andy Kaufman and Mary Lou Henner and Carol Kane, and of course Christopher Lloyd and Tony Danza. It was really, it's kind of the early days of a lot of, well-known sitcom stars, and it's really just a sweet show about a bunch of cab drivers who work the late shift in New York City. And it's the opening credits of the show at the beginning is this song over a really poorly looped video of a taxi driving over, I believe the Brooklyn Bridge. And I say poorly cut because you can tell every time. It's not looped in a way that's subtle at all. And it has a lot of instruments in it. There's a saxophone and a recorder that, to me, sounds a lot like an Irish penny whistle, which is an Irish penny whistle player I really appreciate. And it really is one of the most beautiful TV theme songs of all time, and I'm going to try to do it justice here. And that's the version most people know from the credits, but there is actually it's kind of part one and part two. There's actually a third part that not a lot of people know, and it's not only important for the segue, but I'm going to throw it in here because I think it's a beautiful part of it. You hear it in isolation in the background of a couple of episodes, but you wouldn't really know it's part of the main theme song until there was an episode in the 5th season that was your classic clip show episode. And the credits of that episode had the extended version of the theme, which has this section, which is really hard to play, so forgive me if I botch it a little bit. This is really hard. Okay, let's see. See, there's these jumping triads in the right hand. Really hard to do that just so on the fly. So that's the lesser known third part of the song. And in spite of my choppiness at playing it, I really just kind of wanted to draw some attention to it because I think it's really just a beautiful extra little part of the song that not enough people know. But anyway, you can probably hear that both of these songs, again, same key, similar kind of, sort of bluesy right hand riffs, and similar tempos. Now, Dancing in the Moonlight is clearly in E flat, kind of the progression, the loop starts on F minor, but it comes to rest on this E flat. Like that's where you feel it landing, if you will. And the taxi theme starts on an E flat. So, here's how to do this. At at the end of Dancing in the Moonlight, the chorus just loops pretty much endlessly, and me being a keyboard player, I like to add a little keyboard jam. You know, dancing in the moonlight, everybody feels so warm and bright. It's such a fun and natural sight. Everybody's dancing in the moonlight. And one thing I like to do when doing a segue, and I've shown this in videos before, I think, is to bring the tempo, or not the tempo, bring the volume down a little bit and go to the higher part of the keyboard, make it more delicate. And in this case, it's perfect because the opening of the Taxi theme is delicate and it's in the higher range. There you go. It's pretty simple. Now, personally, I like to do this just as a one-way segue. I don't really feel like there's a need to go back into Dancing in the Moonlight, especially if you can add the C section, the third part of the Taxi theme. And that way the Taxi theme, it becomes more than just like a tease interlude. It becomes its own piece. It almost becomes an outro in itself. And that's the way I like to do it. I'm sure there are ways, if you wanted to start with the Taxi theme and go into Dancing with the Moonlight, you could absolutely do that. But personally, this is the way I like it. But as always, the hope is that you'll take what you see here and do whatever you want to do with it. So hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully you've learned something. I'll see you in the next episode.